Good morning, all Caniacs. Bob Kahn here, and I'm watching the Florida Caniac Perspective. What are you doing?
Hello, and welcome to the Florida Caniac Perspective. I am the Florida Caniac. Today's episode is going to be a simple one. What Carolina needs to do to maintain their playoff hunt, and we're going to answer some of your questions for the hashtag AskFloridaCaniac. However, before we dive into things, I'd like to quickly remind you all that we have t-shirts on sale right now on Amazon.com by just simply searching Florida Caniac, and you can also get hats from our local provider, SquadLocker.com. Not only do they have hats on Squad Locker, but there's different types of apparel to choose from as well. Each item purchased from either one of those sites gets you an entry into a drawing to win the Noah Hannafin All-Star jersey. The more items you buy, the more entries you get to enter that contest and win. So let's refamiliarize ourselves with the standings right now currently. Carolina right now holds the top wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference standings with 4 points behind the Pittsburgh Penguins. However, they do have 2 games in hand against Pittsburgh, which does hold a huge advantage in favor of Carolina to gain the tiebreaker if Carolina does happen to win those games versus Pittsburgh, possibly going 0-2 in that 2-game stand. Montreal isn't too far behind them with a 2-point deficit on them, but not to fear, the Columbus Blue Jackets, although about 3 points behind and just looking outside the wildcard standings, doesn't seem to be too primed to win going forward, but it is a team to keep paying a close eye on just in case they start streaking somehow, somewhere. Now, what does Carolina need to do in order to make themselves into the hunt to get a top metropolitan spot and to maintain the playoff run? Well, they still have some games against the Minnesota Wild and the Montreal Canadiens and the Washington Capitals as the next 3 moving forward. As I said in my previous episode, if they could go 4-2 in this next upcoming stand of a few games, 6 games here, they're in a prime position to win that opportunity to not only get a wild card spot in the playoffs, but to even fight for a Metropolitan Division spot as well. I personally feel that the wins against both Minnesota and Montreal, if they could somehow pull off that back-to-back situation, that would definitely catapult them, especially dealing with a playoff opponent like Montreal. And then with Washington being the road game, but then coming right back to Raleigh to play Washington the next couple of days, if they could win one of those 2 games against Washington, that seems to really catapult them in a great position moving forward. The other game I would also pay attention to very closely is the final matchup against the Pittsburgh Penguins, which comes up the following week, pretty much 1 week after the Montreal game. That will definitely set the tone of where the seeding goes if everything holds true based on what I'm telling you all on here. Pittsburgh and Carolina, the winner of that game, I feel will get a Metropolitan seed versus a wild card spot. And then to recap those final 3 games, Toronto, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, win 2 out of 3 of those games. This team is in a very, very good spot going forward for a playoff position. However, with all that said, there is one other team that we all should really pay close attention to possibly climb above, and that's actually the New York Islanders. New York has the same amount of points as Pittsburgh Penguins. However, Carolina even has a game in hand against those guys as well. And if things go well for Carolina, as I said before, and some key losses by the New York Islanders, there's a very good chance Carolina can even go up to the 2 seed in the Metropolitan Division. So with that said, I feel the 2, the 3, and the wild card spots are all up for grabs when it comes to this playoff hunt. So if all things go said and done, I feel, in my opinion, it could be a Pittsburgh versus Carolina first round if the Islanders falter, or it can even be an Islanders-Carolina first round if things go in that favor as well, and it's a tight race. Can't keep Montreal too much out of it, but I don't see them moving up higher than a wild card spot overall, and I still feel that they're going to be more in a battle versus Columbus than you are with the rest of the Metropolitan Division. Now let me keep it real for a brief moment here. This is a very tough stretch that Carolina has to overcome with the remaining games of this season. There's a lot of really good teams on here. Minnesota fighting for a playoff spot, like I said before. Washington, got to play them twice, and they're tops of the Metropolitan Division. And you even have mighty Toronto to cap off the end of the season to start off the road game at the end. And you got some Jerseys and Phillies in that series as well that kind of soften the blow. However, at the end of the day, everybody's juggling for position throughout this entire division. It is not an easy one to go through, and it's one of the best divisions in the entire NHL, in my opinion. But Carolina needs to keep the gas on the pedal in order to move forward. They cannot sleep on one game. It's not going to happen that way. Great teams find a way to win games they shouldn't win, and I felt a good example of that could have happened against Tampa Bay, but Tampa's just that good, in my opinion. But with the games coming up, they're going to have to dig away to win a game they probably shouldn't win, and that's going to be the way that this team gets the road to the playoffs and even getting the opportunity to be a Metropolitan seed and finally end that playoff drought that this team has had and this fan base has suffered since 2009. And now it's time to get to some of your questions from the hashtag AskFloridaCaniac. If you want to submit a question, just go on either Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, add the hashtag AskFloridaCaniac, and ask your question. You could also send video submissions to my email address, which is rjmeir@icloud.com. The first question comes from Jeff Dwyer, which you all now know as the Kilta Caniac from my previous episode. He asks, why do you think the refs had it against us in 2 straight games rather than calling the game both ways? He's referring to the games against Pittsburgh and Tampa. And I'm going to make this very clear and from a player's point of view and from what I have actually seen personally during my time on the ice. There are certain players out there that do get a lot of recognition from scouts, the media, and fans like us. And the refs kind of call them a little differently because people's favorite players don't want to be treated in the penalty box all the time. So in order to maintain ice time and to maintain publicity, I feel personally that there is some favoritism when it comes to officiating games against certain players. Now, am I saying that that's actually the case? Absolutely not. I do not speak on behalf of these leagues or let alone the NHL. But I do see what I see, just like most fans are seeing out there as well. There are certain cases where players get a little bit of favoritism with the officiating overall. Now, does this happen to overall teams? You can see a smart argument for that, but highly unlikely. The refs do call a fair game. However, from what I've seen from the bench and from my own crease, there are times where there is a call that should be made. And in many cases, they don't make the call and they kind of sweep it under the rug in some cases. A prime example of that would be Sidney Crosby. Just look at him when the refs aren't really paying attention. There are few things that he does get away with. And he kind of whines a little bit too when he doesn't really get his way. Another good example of this is Carolina's Jeff Skinner at the time, where he kind of whined didn't get his way either. So keep that in mind as well. However, Sidney Crosby would get his way more than Jeff Skinner would. However, that might change a little bit since Jeff Skinner is now becoming that stats machine that Buffalo Sabres have been looking for quite some time. And we've always kind of wondered where the heck he's been as well, but that's a whole different conversation. And in regards to the game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, though, I could see the argument there where it could be a team-driven favoritism overall when it comes to officiating. However, they did get that call right against Yanni Gourde. He did deserve the misconduct, and in my opinion, I do like to see him get a 2-game suspension from that nasty hit against Jordan Staal. Jordan was completely defenseless in that play, and I do love the way how the team responded in his defense overall. All in all, Yanni Gourde got what he deserved. However, the rest of the game, there's a lot of debate on that one. Jeff, I hope that answers your question. On to the next one, which also refers to the Tampa Bay Lightning game. This is coming from the Caniac Collector.
Hey, RJ, it's the Caniac Collector here. Last night proved that for 2/3 of a game, the Carolina Hurricanes could stand toe-to-toe with the best team in hockey and arguably the best team in the last 20 years. What is the team missing to get them over the hump in order to make them be able to compete for 60 solid minutes consistently against teams like that?
Thanks, John, for that question. And there's 2 reasons that come into mind, and it's both because this is a young team, and to me, they're not quite a finished product yet, in my opinion. The first thing is confidence. This team, again, is young. They need to gain that confidence, and it's going to take some time to do that. So, with that said, once they get more confident on the ice, knowing that they're going to come in with the expectancy of winning a game, I feel they're going to be more than confident moving forward. The other thing is going to be experience. Again, going back to that young team thing, a lot of rookies, a lot of second, third year guys on this team that are getting into a new coaching system on top of Rod Brindamore. This team does have the right leadership in place to gain that confidence and that experience. It's just a matter of time for this team to make a deep run into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Could it happen this year? Very well so. This team has gelled a lot quicker than I personally expected going forward overall. However, they got to keep pushing and they got to keep digging, and they have the right leadership to keep moving that direction. This next question comes from Jake Lesser, and he asks, I love our Mrazek and McElhinney pairing in goal, but what do you think the shot is for Ned next year? Well, McElhinney has become quite the surprise after picking him up on waivers from the Toronto Maple Leafs. What a mistake that was for Toronto, don't you think? Anyway, with Mrazek playing well also, this has become quite the debate. What do you do with Mrazek and McElhinney? It's quite simple. You got to keep one over the other, or you might be able to keep both. It just depends on what the asking price is by Carolina. On top of that is what the future holds for either one of those players if they want to move forward to another team or not. In my opinion, here's how I feel is going to happen. I feel Mrazek is going to be one that hangs around for Carolina, and I see McElhinney maybe, not if he doesn't leave after the season, he'll hang around for maybe one more year and maybe being a healthy stretch for Nedeljkovic to be that backup goaltending role behind Mrazek. So I think it might be a 3-goalie pull again like the beginning it was of this season, but this is a time that I thought Nedeljkovic was going to be the prime backup goaltender, and so far this is starting to hold true based on what I've seen and what this team has done with the goaltending situation. He looked really good in his one start this season for Carolina for sure. Now, how do I feel the contract's going to go? That's going to be a little debatable. As far as Mrazek goes, he might get probably, I'm going to assume, a 2-3 year deal to hang around. I don't see them doing a 4-year deal after the debacle with Scott Darling. Let's think about that. And that's another conversation because that's going to be money that needs to be taken off the books as well. At the same time, with that deal potentially in place, I do see McElhinney getting a 1-year deal. Maybe the same deal Mrazek signed this year to kind of prove himself worthy one more time. If it's even worth it for McElhinney. He is 35, he's a little bit older, and he may not want to be in the league much longer. So he's going to look for a very short-term deal, and he has found himself a good home here in Carolina. With that in place, he will have to share some time, I feel, with Nedeljkovic, who is the next man forward. So the way I see it going forward after the season, I do see Mrazek being that top guy with McElhinney being the prime backup, and then Nedeljkovic kind of being that guy taking McElhinney as the healthy scratch to get that confidence down the road and setting him up for that backup position. And there might be a good chance that Nedeljkovic might get more than one start next season. This last question comes from Janet Doolittle. She asks, what new rules do you expect to be implemented in the 1920 season? And I only feel that there's one rule that will come into effect, and that's that new helmet rule. As I stated in a previous episode of the Florida Caniac Perspective, the new helmet rule will impose, and what that means is that if a player loses their helmet in any shape or form, you automatically have to go to the bench and change for another player. Until the whistle's blown, then you get your helmet back in a way. Or the rest might get it and bring it to the bench. I'm not sure how they're going to implement that. However, at the same time, if a player intentionally knocks a player's helmet off, I feel that that's going to be a penalty down the road. Or if you don't change right away after losing a helmet, you could be implemented a penalty as well, some sort of delay a game per se, much similar to how you could possibly get a penalty for playing with a broken stick. So I'm not in favor of that rule simply because I don't see any problems with players losing their helmets and still continuing to play. They did it in the past. However, the way how the NHL and today's society is all about safety, I see this being a big hit for next season for sure, and it could be up for debate during the season all the way through. But there is one rule I love to see NHL reinstate back, and that's the old 1-8 playoff format that they had previously before the division realignment. This current realignment, I feel, kind of ruins the playoffs a little bit, where you have prime teams playing against each other in their first round, and you're going to be potentially losing half of your top teams before the second round even starts. I feel that's a little bit of a problem, but that's just my personal opinion. I would love them to bring the old 1-8 format, like they did, back when Carolina won their cup, I believe. And I felt it was no issue with it. So if the NHL happens to be watching this, and I'm sure they've been getting a lot of feedback from different media networks, bring the old format back. It could be discussed next season for sure. Let's hope that becomes the case. Thank you for watching this episode of the Florida Caniac Perspective. Please subscribe to the channel, and all those that do subscribe are automatically entered to win a chance at the Budweiser Goal Light. This is a light that you hook up to your Wi-Fi, and every time the team scores, the light goes off, just like being at the actual game. Comment down below for an added entry as well. As always, guys, thank you for all the great support, and as always, go Canes!